Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's get started with today's Tolkien Tuesday. Now, when I started the TTT, I thought I would gently lead us into letter number 131, that rich source of so much content about the Legendarium. But a funny thing happened on the way to my idea. I got sidetracked into the amazing story of the pre-publication story of The Lord of the Rings. Now, of course, I'd already known much of it, technically all of it, I suppose, as I have read the letters cover to cover before, along with the biography. But I had a lot of fun piecing those facts together into short segments and bringing it to you as a story. Now, fortunately, we were able to get to the point where he was done writing, which gives us a unique opportunity here for Series 2 to pick up right there, but shift into some last-minute pre-publication stuff before digging into reviews and such next week. Now, we're going to start with letter number 142, which Tolkien wrote to Father Robert Murray. Now, the letter is more famously known for Tolkien's statement that The Lord of the Rings is, of course, a fundamentally religious and Catholic work, unconsciously so at first, but consciously in the revision. Now, I'm not here to downplay the role of his personal faith in the creation of Lord of the Rings. We know it certainly played a factor. But I do think it's wise to recall that Tolkien has a tendency in his letters to very much play to his audience. Now, that said, the reason that I wanted to bring this letter in is for a short quote that reveals some of Tolkien's hesitancy about the upcoming release of the first volume of The Lord of the Rings. He writes to Murray, who had read part of the book in galley proofs, "I'm afraid it is only too likely to be true, what you say about the critics and the public. I am dreading the publication, for it will be impossible not to mind what is said. I have exposed my heart to be shot at. I think the publishers are very anxious too, and they are very keen that as many people as possible should read advance copies and form a sort of opinion before the hack critics get busy." And those hack critics would get busy indeed, but not before Tolkien would have to address a few other last-minute pre-publication matters. First, he is still not thrilled at this point about The Two Towers as a title for the second volume, telling Rayner Unwin in letter number 143 that he's not happy at all about it. It must, if there is any real reference in it to Volume 2, refer to Orthanc and the Tower of Cirith Ungol. But since there is so much made of the basic opposition of the Dark Tower and Minas Tirith, that seems very misleading. There is, of course, actually no real connecting link between books 3 and 4 when cut off and presented separately as a volume. Well, he's right. The maps are still a concern too, he says, but getting better, as he explains to Naomi Mitchison in letter number 144. By the way, that's yet another letter that sees Tolkien answering very specific questions about the Legendarium. In it, he explains the Finnish inspiration behind Quenya and the Welsh inspiration behind Sindarin. He explains the kindreds of the elves, says that Tom Bombadil is not an important person to the narrative, and expresses his belief that the Entwives had disappeared for good. But for our purposes today, this is what I want to share from that letter. I am sorry about the geography. It must have been dreadfully difficult without a map or maps. There will be in Volume 1 a map of part of the Shire and a small-scale general map of the whole scene of action and reference, of which the map at the end of The Hobbit is the northeast corner. These have been drawn from my less elegant maps by my son Christopher, who is learned in this lore. But I have only had one proof, and that had to go back. I wisely started with a map and made the story fit, generally with meticulous care for distances. The other way about lands one in confusions and impossibilities, and in any case, it is weary work to compose a map from a story, as I fear you have found. I cannot send you my own working maps, but perhaps these very rough and not entirely accurate drafts, made hurriedly at various times for readers, would be of some assistance. Perhaps when you have done with these manuscript maps or made some notes, you would not mind sending them back. I shall find them useful in making some more, but I cannot get to that yet. I may say that my son's maps are beautifully clear as far as reduction and reproduction allows, but they do not contain everything, alas. Alas indeed. Now, next up is letter number 145 to Rayner Unwin in May of 1954, just 2 months before publication. Tolkien had been sent the draft of the blurbs for the Dust Jacket from the Houghton Mifflin edition. They were his U.S. publisher at the time, along with various quotes that Allen and Unwin were going to incorporate into blurbs for the UK version. He begins with a rather strong critique of the Houghton Mifflin blurbs. The Americans are not, as a rule, at all amenable to criticism or correction, but I think their effort is so poor that I feel constrained to make some effort to improve it, though without much more hope of effect than in the case of the appalling jacket they produced for The Hobbit. I enclose a page of suggestions which you might perhaps send on to Houghton Mifflin. I've got news for him. If he thinks the Houghton Mifflin cover of The Hobbit was bad, he just needs to wait until 1965 when the infamous Lion and Emus cover for The Hobbit released, but I digress. Next, Tolkien discusses the preliminary opinions offered by fellow British authors, including C.S. Lewis, Richard Hughes, and Naomi Mitchison, saying they are too much for his vanity. But they helped. In fact, he was being threatened with eviction from his rooms at Merton College, and then he showed these to the warden. He says, "My stock went up sufficiently to obtain me an even better room." He humbly asks for more blurbs. "So if you have any more appreciations which I have not seen, please let me have a look at them. I promise not to become like Mr. Toad," the boastful amphibian from Wind in the Willows. Now, I think we have time for one more letter today. In number 146, Tolkien is writing back to Alan and Unwin, who have asked for his approval for the dust jacket design. My advice? Don't ask Tolkien for an opinion if you aren't willing to risk his honesty. "I wish that I could say that I approve of the proofs of the jacket herewith returned. I do not. I think they are very ugly indeed. But to be effective, I should have been given an opportunity of criticism at an earlier stage. I tell you what I think, since I am asked: tasteless and depressing. But surely asking my opinion is a formality. I do not suppose that any of my criticisms could be met without serious delay. I would rather have the things as they are than cause any more delay. But if this can be done without delay, I would like a different type for the title lettering, at least on the page. The spine is passable." Oof. Man. The man has opinions, and he's not afraid to speak them. Now, come back next week as he expresses some satisfaction with the updated jacket, and the reviews for Fellowship of the Ring start rolling in. For a deeper dive into Tolkien, listen to the Prancing Pony Podcast, my award-winning show with more than 7 years working our way through the professor's books and learning more about the man himself. Please join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Word Nerd Wednesday. Please like and subscribe on YouTube, and follow or subscribe on your podcast apps. And follow at Tolkien Times on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.